Hi everyone, I'm oboist and composer Laura Adkins, and this is Intro to Extended Techniques for Oboe. Today we're going to be talking about Flutter-tongue. If you haven't watched the intro video on my YouTube channel, I would recommend that you do that first, because in that video I go over what I mean by extended techniques, as well as the overall structure of this method book. So Flutter-tongue is another way to change the timbre of the note. It's an effect that you can add on top of a note. You do this effect in different ways depending on what instrument you're playing. On the oboe, there are two different ways to do Flutter-tongue, but the way that I recommend starting with and working on principally is to do a growl in the back of your throat, similar to the feeling when you're gargling a liquid. The other way to do Flutter-tongue on most woodwind instruments is to roll your R's sort of at the front of your mouth with your tongue. That sort of thing. The reason that I recommend not using that I recommend using the throat growl, is one, the growl is easier to control, it's subtler, and it's a good place to start to get really comfortable with what Flutter-tongue can sound like on the oboe and the feeling of controlling that while you're playing. Flutter-tongue, using your tongue, rolling your R's, first of all, not everyone can do that. Some people physically can't do that. And if you can't, that's okay. That's what the throat growl is for. If you can roll your R's, if you are able to do that, I still find that most people have to let a significant amount of air escape from their embouchure, at least to get it started. And that noise, that air noise, can be distracting. The tongue, Flutter-tongue, is also louder and more raucous and harder to control. It's possible to work up to being able to control it better, but I think at that point it's usually better to just switch to the throat growl, which can be more subtle. If you are in a large ensemble playing something like Rite of Spring, something loud and bombastic and it calls for Flutter-tongue, and you can do the kind of Flutter-tongue where you roll your R's, go for it. If you feel like that is the choice for that moment, your artistic choice, then go for it. But being able to do both kinds of Flutter-tongue just gives you more tools in your bag. It makes you a more flexible player. It gives you more musical options. So that preamble aside, let's get started on learning how to Flutter-tongue with the throat growl. So just like for singing and playing, we're going to have you start completely without the oboe, without the reed, just getting a feel for what's happening in your mouth and throat. So the first thing I want you to do is just blow a supported airstream and then add that gargle, add that sort of growl in your throat. If you can't get a sense of what that physically feels like, try it actually gargling. Try it with some liquid. Now, most people, when they first gargle, will add their voice. This is so silly. But try to do it without your voice. Try to do it just the gargling feeling without your vocal cords being activated. That sounds so gross, I'm so sorry. So if you need to, get a glass of water and gargle. You know, maybe don't record yourself doing it on video, but once you've gotten that feeling, just try it without the water. Try it blowing a steady airstream and then adding that same gargle feeling into your throat. Once you're comfortable doing that on the airstream, now it's time to add the reed. So just like we did with singing and playing, you're going to start playing a pitch on the reed, and instead of singing, you're going to add that gargle, that growl in your throat. Now, as you start working on this with the reed, it can be helpful to record yourself just on your phone or something, just so that you can hear what it sounds like outside of the vibrations of your own head. The sound probably will be quite subtle at first. The Flutter-tongue might not really come through, and that's okay. Just get used to the feeling and start to work on loosening up a little bit. I like to think about changing where in my throat I'm doing the gargle. Sometimes if I think about moving it higher, I find it can loosen up. Sometimes if I think about moving it lower, it can loosen up. And the looser that growl, the more you'll hear the Flutter-tongue. So do a little experimentation, play around with it, and see what changes you can make. If your flutter tongue starts and stops at first, that's okay, that's normal. Just keep working on it, keep working on being able to maintain that throat growl for longer stretches of time. Once you're comfortable doing flutter tongue with just the reed, now it's time to add the oboe. The exercise that I give you has you try flutter tongue on 3 different notes, A, and then C, and then F. But you are welcome to experiment with other notes. I chose these because A is a pretty stable mid-register note, C is a very flexible note, and F is a little bit more resistant. It's not quite as resistant as, say, a C sharp, but I wanted to give you the experience of adding flutter tongue to notes of varying resistance. Once you're comfortable with those, try it on other notes. Try it higher register, try it lower register, just experiment and get used to the feeling. Now, as you first start adding flutter tongue on the oboe, you might find that you have to let a little bit of air escape from your embouchure. You could probably hear that I was doing that just to get it started. If that's the case, that's okay. As you practice this, work towards minimizing that to the greatest extent possible. You want to keep your embouchure as stable as you can while you are adding flutter tongue. The etude for this section is a fun little scherzando with a few sort of obnoxious flutter tongue notes in there. These are supposed to be kind of obnoxious. They are supposed to be in your face and loud. Each flutter tongue note is under a fermata, so just hold the flutter tongue note as long as you comfortably can and breathe after each flutter tongue note as needed. If you are able to do the type of flutter tongue where you're rolling your R's, this could be a good opportunity to try out both, try working out both kinds of flutter tongue and see what the difference is in the physical feeling of what adjustments you have to make in order to play it, as well as what the difference is in the sound. Record yourself on your phone, listen back, just experiment and have fun.